I think I explained what the link meant. It's an acronym actually
Correct.
for what you're about.
Oh,
Explain
you
to
want
us.
me to explain what that is?
Yes, please.
In brief, me and one of my current partners and a few other close friends while in college, we actually had started a internet type of business where we wanted to highlight different things that were going on in the Hampton Roads area. And I was the on-camera talent. I'm the one that does interviews, and you guys know the type of work that I do. And as it relates, I will always be the individual who would interview people, ask questions. No matter what type of event it was, I would be that individual. So it was kind of like I was the link between the people and everything that was going on in Hampton Roads. And the Lynk, LYNK, stands for Linking Youth, News, and Knowledge. So our goal was, how can we connect people? How can we connect the youth? How can we get information out? How can we pretty much put people on to what's going on in Hampton Roads? Whether it's events that are going on, whether it's community related things going on, whether it's some news that was important. You guys really discuss the political scene sometimes about voting and things like that. So our overall goal was, how can we get the word out to Hampton Roads about any and everything that was going on? Because we were like, if the news wasn't showing certain things that happened like in Portsmouth or nearby cities, then how are people going to find out like what's going on? So we try to develop that platform. And ever since then, I would introduce myself as Mike Lynk, and it stuck. And there's people that I went to college with that know my last name, but I've been doing it for so long. And even on college, when we first started it, I used to do something called On the Yard with Mike Lynk, and I'm a graduate of Norfolk State University.
Behold, and I had wait a minute, behold the green and gold.
Yes, behold the green and gold. I had a television show that I would do. I would basically, the same things that I wanted to do for Hampton Roads, I would do it for anything that was going on the campus of Norfolk State University. And I created a television show. And that's kind of really where the not necessarily the birth of how the Mike Lynk came about, but that's where I started experimenting with the brand amongst my college colleagues and friends and stuff. And when people see me now, they don't say Mike Wilkins, they say, "What's up, Mike Lynk?" And that's how the brand developed over course of the year. So.
Yeah, Mike, and I kind of, like I said, I when I first met you, I thought that was your name actually, and I jumped ahead of myself. I wanted to say that not everybody in the city of Portsmouth went to IC Northam, but the smart ones did.
Yes, they did.
Mike is a grad of IC Northam and Norfolk State, as he mentioned.
Maroon.
IC Northam and Norfolk State. And he's self-employed, a video editor at Ink Linked Studios.
That's Viz. Visually inclined
video or studios. He has a podcast, a lot of other things going. He's into health and fitness, and a motivational speaker, travels throughout the country, and a member of Phi Alpha fraternity.
Correct.
Incorporated.
Correct.
And we are so fortunate to have him here this morning. And he's also a recent author. So we'll get into that a little later. But again, welcome for coming on. And I think some of our co-hosts might have some questions or comments to make to you, Michael, at this time.
Yeah, Mike. What community in Truxton, Lord have mercy, forgive me. What community in Portsmouth did you grow up in?
Um, where do I start? Well, um, the majority of my years before it was torn down, I grew up in what they call Academy Park, aka KP. There. Then after that, me, my mom, and my sister moved to the Douglas Park area
Okay.
of Portsmouth. And, you know, currently my mom lives in Cavalier Manor.
Okay. All right. And then you went on to go to Norcom High School. And what subjects did you take there that got you motivated to move into the arena in which you're in now?
Honestly, nothing. When
You hurt my heart.
when in high school, I was thinking about being a computer science major, which I was when I first went to college. Because I thought at that particular time that is what I wanted to do. I thought I wanted to go down that road. But you know, you get in there, you start doing the work, and you realize I realized that I couldn't find myself like really happy about like doing that type of like work. So I switched my major to mass communications and broadcast journalism, because in high school I would play around, you know, with like cameras and stuff. But I didn't realize that I would end up in the space that I am now. Back then, I just kind of like doing it like a hobby, like type of thing. And then when I got to college, I really dived into it when I realized computer science wasn't my path. And you know, I've always liked sports and, you know, the graphics and how camera angles and action movies and things like that. So that's why I ended up switching my major. And at one point, I wanted to be an anchor for, you know, news, because one of my professors, they used to tell me they felt like I had the talent to become an anchor, because I was one of the students who basically ended up helping a lot of my peers do their projects and things like that, for whatever reason. And I think that was me discovering that, you know, this particular area was a good niche for me. So.
And it's a good thing that you moved into this area, because you have really perfected yourself in this area, because you do amazing work in the video field. So you have worked for a number of people in the Portsmouth area. Could you just name some of those people who you've done video projects for?
Where do I start? Let's just say, for instance, Delegate Don Scott, who had an event recently. I done work for him. There's people on the school board currently that I've done work for: Yolanda Edmonds, Vernon Tillage. There's people that I've done work for in the past. Sheriff Michael Moore, I've done work for him. I've done work for Tamara Shoemake as well. Cardell Patillo, work has been done for him as well. Who else have I done work for? It's a lot. I can't remember like right offhand, but I've done a lot of work for different people for the city of Portsmouth.
And that's apparent that you've done a good job for you to go from one individual to the next, to the next, to the next. That means that you've perfected your craft, and they're pleased with the craft that you've given them. So that's a blessing there.
Yes, me and my partners, we've done a nice amount of work, and my partners are from Portsmouth as well. One of them's name is Marcus Johnson, and another gentleman's name is Ricky Lawrence as well. We're all from Portsmouth, so we try to do our best to find a way to work with our city and give back.
Mm-hmm.
So
Well, it seems great, James.
Yeah, Mike. First,
yes, sir.
thanks for being on the show this morning. And actually, as I listen to you, you're a perfect example of somebody who has gone to an HBCU university that started off on one path, found their calling, and pursued that path. Am I correct? And this is
Correct.
something I get from just listening to you. And but for somebody in the mass communication and broadcasting field, I have a question for you. And what is your opinion on the mass disinformation campaigns out here, especially in a political sense?
What is my opinion on it? I think if you, as an individual, like really do your research and don't take everything for face value, you will find that there is less truth in the misinformation that gets put out. I think as a people, sometimes we can get misled by the information that gets put out. And I think doing things like this and getting on platforms like this, we got to start speaking out about the misinformation. Of course, they got things, where they bring up what is, the fact checks and things like that. But it's, in my opinion, I personally don't like it. I think it's a lowball way to get to like where you want to. I think if you want to win, I think you should try to stay on the straight and narrow in order to win, as it relates to politics. But as we can see, whether it's local or national, you can adopt that behavior of doing negative type of campaigning and things like that. And I think as a person, who you are, your character should stand out. And if it actually stood out, then you shouldn't have to go down that route just to get votes, just to sway people into believing something that's not true about your opponent. And I just don't like those type of politics. But we've seen and witnessed that people will go to the negative lengths just to win a competition. Some people, you got to be okay with losing. You go back to the drawing board and figure out another way. Get out there, get on the ground, shake hands and things like that. So that's my opinion on it.
Yeah, and people have gotten away from the morality of it. And I think that's what the Colonel was talking about, especially with the social media now and the internet not having the same rules as some of the network TVs. And they're taking advantage of the people's vulnerability to believe in anything they see on the and using that, which is kind of unfair, to the people that are vulnerable to that. Mike, I want to get into Start the Path. I see in the background you have on the table, you have your book.
Yep.
Yeah. And the title of it is
F Father's Day.
Yeah, Father's Day. I want you to, and you can explain what that means, but I want to sort of start the path that led you to writing that book. And we go back to I.C. Norcom, and you talked about before, you were on our show once before, and you talked about growing up without the father and the bitterness that was building up in you as you were growing up, some of the things you saw. And even though it was tough back then, it had to be some influences. I don't know, when you're at Norcom, you played football, but even with that bitterness, had to be some influences that kept you going. Can you talk about some of those things and what led up to you, writing a book eventually? But we'll walk that path.
All right, great, yeah. So yes, for a long stretch of years, yes, my father didn't or wasn't there. I would say my father was around from birth to about the age of 11, 12 years old. Then after that, he was out of the home. And me and my dad eventually started to rekindle our relationship when I was around 30, 32, 33 years old, around there. So roughly about a little over 25 or so years, he wasn't there. But influences, let's just say for high school, I played football, ran track, and I played basketball in high school. Anybody that's in Portsmouth, if you know Robert Earls, he was my basketball coach. So we've always been like really close, and to this day, that's a stand-up guy, family man, of course, pastor and preacher, and always, and encouraging, and hard, not just because he's a coach, but just in general. I've seen how he raised his own children. I love the fact that how many years him and his wife has been together. I've always admired that about any family where the mom and the father, stay together for, those amount of years, no matter good or bad. And, you can stick it out, as long as you're not in a situation where it's life threatening or, to the point where it's bad for your health. So he was one major influence. Of course, everybody know Coach Joe Langston.
Yes.
From IC Norcom. I would say me and Coach Langston weren't close, but at the same time, he was a man who was strong, stern, about doing work, working hard. He had this thing where he was like, if are you injured or are you hurt? If you're injured, then you can't play. But if you're hurt, you can play. And the way that I took that was at the end of the day, no matter what you go through, you always got to get up and push through. And that's always stuck with me growing up as well. So if I had to think about like high school, those individuals were probably some influences in my life as kind of like indirectly. And if Coach Langston was allowed, it would be his first time hearing that coming from me. And I know Coach Earls, if he ever gets a chance to look at this, he knows this about me because me and him talk periodically. We conversate through Facebook and things like that. So, and I saw him recently at an event too. So.
And Mike, and even with those influences at the high school level, it still was some conflicts within yourself. Even I remember, I played ball too. Even though I was sitting on the bench, I can remember hearing my dad in the stands saying, put him in the game. But, either way, he was there. And that was important to me, whether I was playing or I was on the bench. That was very important. It was a very important part of my life because those are very formative years that stick with you. So even though you had those influences at Norcom, you had those conflicts within yourself because a lot of kids, other kids, parents or fathers were at the games or at the track meets or in the gym, but yours wasn't. At least to your knowledge.
Let me touch on that. Yeah. The conflicts, yes, I definitely dealt with that. But of course, I probably like a lot of us who grew up in single parents homes, you find a way to suppress it or distract yourself from it. And I went through a lot of that. Like I mentioned before when I was just talking about like, Coach Earls and just looking at his family structure. Periodically throughout my life, I would draw to that because it's like at one point I had it and then it got ripped away. So anytime I would see a family, like a whole family, the nuclear family, anytime I would see that, I really like admired that, because that's just something that I wanted. And it did bother me whether I was playing sports or doing some type of like activity that my parents weren't able to be there. My mom, worked like 3 jobs. So when it came to activities that I were involved in, my mom probably came to a few of my basketball games, but outside of that, she wasn't able to come to my football games, because football games are in the evening, and my mom had a night job and things like that. And of course, my dad wasn't around, so I didn't get that. Hearing that parent yelling in the stands, rooting me on. I didn't get into that, and my friends and stuff, a few of them had that, and it was something that I did desire, and that has something to do with why I wrote my book. So,
and you go in deeper into the book, and Leah, I'll let you get it, but I want to make sure before we go off the air on the radio and continue on Facebook Live, which is what we do, Mike, I want to make sure that the listeners on the radio know how to get your book. Yes. And goes into detail of what we're talking about now. And we're scratching the surface. But before we go off at 7, I want you to tell the people on the radio, listen on the radio, how they can purchase your book and the name of it and how they can purchase it. And then we'll continue the conversation.
All right. There's a couple ways you can get it. First, you can, through social media, if you want to instant message me, direct message me, you can inbox me, and you can get the book through me as well. I just need your address, and I can ship it to you. If you're in Portsmouth, I'll bring it directly to you. That's my city. That's where I'm from. I'll bring it directly. And I'll sign it, and I'll bring it directly to you. You can also go to my website, which is MikeLynk.com, and purchase my book as well. And if you're an avid Amazon shopper, you can go to Amazon as well and purchase the book as well. You can get it from there. My book is on. I try to get my book on as many platforms as possible, from Barnes and Noble, Target, Books A Million, Booktopia, you name it. I'll try to get my book in every single book distribution platform there is. And if I haven't figured it out yet, I'm going to try to do that as well. So that's where you can get my book from, those 3 areas.
And tell the name of the book again, Mike.
The name of the book is F Father's Day, A Story of Reconciliation. F, which is spelled EFF. And I guess we can talk more about the title, I guess, whenever we transition.
Yes. I'm sure that has a specific meaning.
Yes, it does. Yes.
I want to thank all the listeners for listening on WGPL 1350 AM. You're still online, but and so we don't interrupt the conversation as we go to Facebook. I want to thank you in advance for listening this morning. And please come back next week with the Portsmouth Coffee Talk as we have another guest. Thank you. All right, Leah.
Okay. With you not having your father, your mother at your games, a lot of times kids use that as a crutch as to why they can't succeed. How did you motivate yourself, even though your parents weren't there for all your games to support you and all the things that you were doing? How did you motivate yourself to go on and do the things that you're doing now?
I would say a partial of it first began through my mom. And my mom always stressed going to school, getting your education, doing something with yourself. She was really on me in particular, like hard. I think I think people when they have their first child, of course, you're learning, you figure out things on what to do. Of course, I have an older sister, so I think from whatever my mom and probably my dad at one particular point, whatever they learned from raising my sister first, you know, things, they probably added on some things when it came to me. But you know, in general, my mom would always just stress school, finishing high school, because my mom wasn't able to finish high school. She had to stop in 9th grade. And I think part of it was because she helped raise all her brothers and sisters. My mom is one of 18 children.
Ooh.
She had 9 brothers. Well, one of her sisters died at birth, which was a twin, but in general, it's 9 boys, 8 girls. So stressing that, finishing school and things like that. And, you know, the life that I experienced growing up, and the things that I went through, and I talk about in my book, a lot of people don't know, like right before high school, I was homeless. Me, my mom, and my sister. And people can find out more about that and how that unfolded in my book on how that happened. And I'll touch on it a little bit here. In short, my father ended up becoming abusing substance and as well drinking and becoming an alcoholic. And he chose to indulge in that life and put his resources into those things, which didn't go into the house, which eventually got us kicked out and homeless or whatever. And I know what it's like to pack your stuff up and live inside of a car, you know, for a little bit. So that all of that like really impacted me in that manner, which also has a reason as to why I named the book the way that I named it, as well as why I wrote the book as well. Just in general, to speak to what a child goes through, whether it's similar to my situation or different situations, like once the father like leaves the home, all the emotions and the feelings and the thoughts that you go through is what I wanted to speak to, the voice of us who grow up in single parent homes, and speaking from that particular voice to let parents know that even though we're children, you know what I'm saying? Even though you think we're not absorbing or observing what's going on, we see it. We just don't say nothing. We don't necessarily know how to communicate it, but we soak it all in. We absorb it. And it can manifest in a lot of different ways. And for me, outside of my mom pushing me, I got to the point where I said, I have to be different. And a lot of it stemmed from basically saying I didn't want to be anything like my dad was. And whatever he was, I was going to be the total opposite. You know what I'm saying? If he was a person who was an alcoholic, I'm not going to be an alcoholic. If he was a person that was doing drugs, I'm not going to touch a drug. You know, if he was doing this type of work, I'm going to do something totally different, something better, or whatever. That was like my motivation. And that's how I pretty much got to the space that I am and where I'm going. So I use that, I guess, as my fuel for my success, and said that, you know, I can't become a statistic, you know. I don't want to become a statistic. And despite who my dad was, I always said that in the back of my head, first and foremost, I got to make my mom proud because she went through so much. And I didn't want to add any extra stress, even though I had my little moment, like right before high school. After that, like when I entered that high school, I said from this point on, when I turned 13, that I was going to stay on the straight and narrow and do what I needed to do to make sure that I could put some ease on my mom. And, you know, that was, you know, how I got to I guess, the man that I am now, you know. So,
And during
Yeah.
this 27 years, when your father was not in your life, did you have any contact with him at all during those 20 years?
my dad, I'll give my dad this before we really start working on our relationship. Despite what his life like was, ever so often he would try to like connect with me, but it had become a particular point from the age of, let's just say, when I was 12, probably to about 15, 16, I really didn't hear from him. So over those years, I built up that bitterness and stuff that James talked about. I was fine with him and my mom divorcing and separating and all of that, because I felt like their relationship wasn't stable. It wasn't good, you know. You know, there was domestic violence in my house. You know, I witnessed my mom and dad have, you know, physical fist fights. You know, I watched my dad come in the house, you know, drunk and belligerent and high and things like that. And I was okay that he was not in the home, because I was like, this ain't healthy. You know what I'm saying? I was like, this not good. You know, I was like, it's okay. I was cool if him and my mom wasn't in a relationship. And I was literally thinking like this at 11 years old. You know, I was just upset, like, you know, don't forget about me and my sister. You know what I'm saying? You still got 2 kids. You know, you still need to like come see what's up with us. If you and my mom can't get along, cool. Because, you know, you don't need to be around it. You got to put your hands on that stuff like that. I mean, my dad never hit me and my sister, you know, the normal parenting or whatever. Like, you know, it wasn't anything outside of, you know, what, you know, how us was raised. You know, I can honestly say there was a time that I felt like, you know, I probably deserve a little belt on my butt, you know, growing up or whatever. But my dad, with me and my sister, never did anything as far as what people would consider like abuse to a child. He didn't treat us bad, you know, he didn't do anything. It was just him, like his situation with my mom, you know, I would just say that was unhealthy. But my feelings that I developed came from my dad basically not stepping up and being there for me and my sister. So,
You know, Mike, you know, as I listen to your story and I see how your father was not in your life and at times was a negative influence in your life, but I think there's another linchpin in there that through your lifeline. And Lee had mentioned about some folks use it being a fatherless home as being a negative and using an excuse. But I think there's a piece here that we got to give our props to, and if you already attested to, is that at various times you had mentors, and say out in, for example, Coach Langston and different coaches in your life that substituted, that you may not have known, they've substituted as a father and as a mentor throughout your life. And then when you went on and off of stage, you had different instructors and things like that, professors that give you a different aspect of you can do better, you can do more. And I think that what I want to get around and say is that we don't value our educators throughout our lives, starting from the K through 12 and into the academics and at North State and at our HBCUs. And we don't give them enough props for what I call the soft mentorship that they give our kids as in the growth and development. And could you speak to something like that?
Yeah, I would agree. I think when it comes to teachers, professors, as we all say and advocate for, like they deserve more than what they get. I feel like educators should be making PhD money, even though they don't have a PhD. because without them, without their advice, without their mentorship, without their indirect way of parenting the kids that they come in contact with, such as myself, you got to say, like, where would they be? You got to think about those who drop out or, fall in that school to prison pipeline. How those people missed the mark and weren't able to, quote unquote, finish high school or maybe go on to a higher level of education. And of course, we know school isn't for everybody, but to come in contact with educators, they really help us go down the path of, a path that's going to guide you to where you need to go and get you to the space to where you need to be. I give all credit to any teacher or professor that I've come in contact with that's helped me get to the space that I am now. I have about probably 4 or 5 professors in college that really stuck with me. I had a professor, his name was Dr. Cole, real cool man. And he taught African-American history, but the way he taught it, it was just like life. It wasn't even like book, like textbook, like just sitting down, reading a book and give you assignments. He taught it from like a life perspective. Meeting that man was a good thing as well. I have this other professor where we're we're friends on Facebook, and she inboxes me or comments on my stuff, and she calls me Sweet Pea. It's just like a mama. You know what I'm saying? Outside of being a student to that particular professor. And I just think it's great to have those type of individuals in your life. I wouldn't trade them for nothing in the world.
And Mike, you mentioned Reverend Dr. Earls and his influence as a coach, but also early on, religion came into your life because, and we talk about your book. Throughout the book, you have Bible verses to relate to each chapter, which I look at as another source of your strength, and well as another source of sharing your education. You also have quotes from particular authors. How was religion a big part of your upbringing or your source of your strength, like I mentioned earlier?
Okay. I'll tie that question into why I titled the book the way that I titled it. And it's kind of like twofold. One, from a marketing standpoint, from just face value or just thinking about the book, and it's called EFF Father's Day. It's a little provocative, a little for shock value, but there's meaning behind it and how it relates to religion, or I guess my spiritual makeup, if I can put it that way. In general, my family are full of preachers, bishops, and they are prayer warriors. If you ask any of my close friends growing up, you could go to a cookout and you do you pray over your food, grace and stuff like that. But if you go to one of my family cookouts, it could go from just a regular saying grace, and out of nowhere, they shouting and stuff, and it's funny when I talk about it. But my family in general, it's almost kind of like you have your times like growing up and being young, where you go out there, you have fun, but the foundation of my family and what I've been around growing up, that's the root of it as well. And the F in EFF Father's Day has a lot to do with emotions and feelings that we go through who grew up without our fathers in our lives. Of course, EFF, you know, the most negative word you can think of, which is the F-U-C-K, you go through that emotion like F it, you know, I don't want to deal with it, you know, or F him type of like thing. Then there's you forget about it. The F for forgetting, like it's kind of like out of sight, out of mind, right? Or another F, you're frustrated with the situation, right? You're frustrated with the situation. Then you go through where you feel like, depending on, and sometimes I felt like my father was fake, you know what I mean? Say one thing, but do another, like broken promises type of thing. In my book, when you first get into a couple of, in the beginning, it breaks down like what F means, or whatever. And the way I tie my spiritual growth into that, when I started to get my relationship closer to God, he helped me unpack all of those feelings. He helped me address all of those feelings. My spiritual growth helped me get to the point of healing, like where I am now. And it got me to the point where I was able to fix my relationship with my father. I was able to address all of those F's and get to the point of another F, which was forgiveness for the life that my dad lived and his contribution to the negative things that impacted my life, and how me and him were able to sit down at some particular point of our lives and have a conversation about him being absent, how it impacted me, how it impacted him, and how we were able to reconcile our relationship and my spiritual growth personally, because I felt like growing up, I knew that him not being around, there was something that I was missing. And I learned it through being in relationships with women, as well as, when you get out on your own, and when you're taking care of yourself and learning to be a man and providing and things like that. I knew that there was something that I probably should have picked up from my father, and him not being in the home, that I was missing, or whatever. And I wanted it, I wanted to figure out, what is it that, as much as my mom had to sort of play both roles, it was just certain things that she would never be able to teach me, that I knew that a father is designed to do, to teach his children, or whatever. And not having that, and learning that I didn't have certain particular skills or behaviors or thinking processes or certain strategies on how to tackle things that my father was supposed to give me. I was like, one, I gotta forgive myself and heal and get out of these feelings, get out of these thoughts, because in general, I am accountable for myself. At the end of the day, my dad was accountable for his own actions. And I learned, for me, being a man in my spiritual growth, at the end of the day, I have my own choices. I have to live my own life. I have to do what needs to be done for little Mike in order to succeed and move forward. And I can't harbor all of this stuff that I got going on with my dad, because if I did, I wouldn't have wrote this book. I wouldn't have got to this point. I wouldn't have got to the point of forgiveness to even have a man-to-man conversation. And my dad, before he passed away, helped me write this book. You know what I'm saying? And in a nutshell, that's how this whole book was birthed. So
how did you reconnect with your father after all those years?
I've always known where my dad was, where he lived and stuff like that. So my mom, despite what my mom went through, my mom has never spoke ill in front of me or my sister. to my knowledge, about my dad. She's always left the door open for the relationship to be there, regardless of what they went through. And I think, you know, God bless in that way, where it was able to be done that way. And in my book, I talk about, I went through a 2-year, I call it therapy, spiritual type of like development, professional development, where I ended up getting and buying a journal, right? And when I went through this 2-year process, it basically made me confront my relationship that I didn't have with my father. And in that journal, I wrote all questions, all my feelings, everything that I was going through. I poured it into that book to basically get rid of what I was harboring in the inside. And I took the book to my father. You know, we didn't have a relationship prior to this. I took the book to my father. I gave it to him. By this particular time, my dad turned his life around. He wasn't the alcoholic and drug user or whatever. He had got himself into church, joined the choir and things like that. And I gave him the book, and I told him to read it. And I told him the questions that were in there. I put a few of the questions in the book that I wrote, but not all of them. And I told him to read the book, answer the questions, don't sugarcoat it, be honest with me. And if he wasn't honest with me, he could forget about ever having a relationship with me. I was pretty blunt with my dad with that. And he took the book, he read it, and he answered all my questions. And I told him when he was done with it to call me and I would come pick it up. So that exchange was how it pretty much broke the ice between us. Because what I think I figured out was, it's hard, well, for me, it was hard to sit in front of my dad without getting emotional and upset to first address everything that went on in our lives and him not being around. So I found out through that 2-year period, by writing out your feelings, putting it on paper and letting it out that way was easier. So I said, let me try this with my dad or whatever. So I gave him the book. It was easy for him to read and feel what I wrote through those pages. And I don't know what emotions he went through reading it or whatever when he first opened the journal up and started going through it and everything. I don't know how he felt. I don't know if he cried or whatever, but I do know when I went to pick up the book, he gave it to me, and that was when he apologized. That was when he said he was sorry. That was when he literally explained what was going on in his life, and that he shouldn't have went down that road from putting his hands on my mother to cheating on my mother to not being there for me and my sister. And that's kind of like, that's all growing up, that's all I wanted to hear. From there, that's what we basically, our relationship just blossomed and exploded, and it got better. And I was able to literally look at my dad and say, like, I love you, because before that, I wouldn't utter those words, I didn't even want to, look him in his eye. And that's how my spiritual growth got me to that point of writing this book, got me to that point of fixing my relationship with my dad. And I learned that parents, when they raise their children or they do a particular thing, parents can be stubborn, or they can be sort of like stuck in their ways, or they feel like if they've damaged or hurt their child, some parents don't know how to approach the situation and just be upfront and just say, I'm sorry, or because they think that their child is going to lash out or snap on them. especially when their child becomes an adult. I figure my dad probably felt that way about like me and him. But I think my dad, he took it on the chin. He heard what I had to say, and then we got through it. And I think if more children like myself, if they do know their biological father, if they read my book, I try to create a book that's a workbook that teach you like my strategy, and try to go down the path that I did to try to reconcile their relationships with their father. And hopefully for those who choose to buy the book, get the book, read the book, that they'll do the work that's in the inside. And at least it could open the door. If they don't rekindle their relationship with their father, at least they can do some personal healing, and those are the two goals of what me and my dad wanted to accomplish when we wrote this book, to try to get there, to heal, because me and him were able to heal from this situation. And for us, we were able to reconcile our relationship. And that's what we want for other people, because so many people grow up without, their parent in the home. And we want to see people get to the point to where we got to.
Mike, I think that was so important to include your father's answers in the book, because each answer started out with my dear son. And that had to be healing, to see that every time he answered a question, he addressed you that way.
What's funny too? After I kept reading it, his answers, and he would start off like that, which is probably crazy now. But I was saying to myself, like, Dad, why do you keep starting off like I ain't right around the corner? You know what I'm saying? He writing it like a letter, like I'm off in another country. But that's besides the point. But yeah, you're right. Just him saying like those words, my dear son, it almost like each time you read it, it's like a brick was like removed, the world was removed off my shoulders. So yeah, and it's almost like I could literally hear his voice from reading what he wrote.
How long have you reconciled? Did your father pass?
A question.
Hold up.
Silent. Colonel has a question. He's been silent, but I want to make sure we get this part in, because your book is so important. It's going to be important, especially if it can be included in the curriculum in our schools for younger kids. As we talk about the violence that's going on now, especially in the city of Portsmouth, your feelings about how, because a lot of those youngsters that might be out there doing some of the things might have been in those same situations that you are, fatherless or motherless, and didn't have that opportunity to make that breakthrough. So they're still out there acting out. So you looking at it today, I mean, give us your feelings and how you feel that maybe your book can probably help in those situations as well.
The emotions part, the F's part, is so many things that we go through with the F's. And if you don't know how to channel those emotions, they can manifest in ways in which we see kids doing today, where they resort to like negative behavior, negative activity. I'm thankful that my mom or my mindset didn't take me down that path, but I think my book can help address some of those things that are going on in the inside. And some of it would have to do either the experiences that they're going through, because a father isn't in the home, and there's a lack of structure or discipline that, a person may not be getting. And I think my book can like help you kind of like dig into that, as well as address the subconscious thoughts you might have because your father isn't around. I believe my book can help a person really unpack that, if they're willing, to have an open heart, open mind, read the material and actually address and write out some of the things that I present to them through the book as it relates to their specific situation. I believe it has some sort of a healing component to it that will be useful for anybody that chooses to, open it up and read it. And I mean, I've had people that have both parents in their life purchase the book, read it, and be like, even though they had both parents, there's some things in it that they can pull from it that were healing for them, even though they had both parents in their life.
And could you just show your book? Because I have some people in here asking the name of the book. Show the book and say the name again, please.
The book is called F Father's Day, A Story of Reconciliation. All right. And again, you can get it on Amazon. You can go to my website, MikeLynk.com. That's Lynk with a Y for yellow as well to get the book. Or they can inbox you guys. Y'all can hit me up.
Yes,
or they can inbox me on Facebook as well. And I can get the book to them.
Good job. Good job.
It's
Did
very
you have something to say?
This is a story of redemption, healing, and it's uplifting. And we sort of needed that today, and, especially on this Monday. It is great to, for your story to be told this Monday. And it's just good. And I thank you ahead of time.
Thank you, sir.
And your shirt says responsible manhood. Can you just give us some words on what your shirt says and how do we get to that point?
In general, just growing up and not having my dad for a certain amount of years, from the mentoring that I do, working with young people, because I also help navigate and manage a nonprofit that's called No Father, No Excuse. And it kind of goes to some things that Mr. Thomas has said, and you guys have asked me. In learning and watching young people and even adults grow up and don't have their father in their life. And I really have always had a desire to push and promote responsible manhood to male youth and adult men, and get back to that space, because it's our responsibility as boys growing into men, and as us as adults, that we have a responsibility to our community. We got a responsibility to our family. We have a responsibility to ourselves, to be in a position to be a good example, to get away from the gun violence and stuff like we talked about that's going on in Portsmouth, to get away from going around that negative path. I believe that there has to be a teaching from the men who are being responsible to not just do it inside their homes, but to do it at work, to get on social media and talk about it, to speak it out loud, to find platforms like this, to be visible. A lot of us who are responsible, as far as us as men, have to be more visible and present out in the open. Men have to really take on, especially in our community, I feel like we really have to take on that role, even if it's not, when it comes to children, even if it's not like your child or your family member, like we gotta open up, we gotta speak out loud, we gotta promote this responsible manhood, because restoring the male back into the household, and I'm not talking about boys who are sons, but fathers who need to be in the house, men who need to be in the house to create that overall structure and get back to whole families, is important to me. And that's why I wear this on my chest, or whatever, because I think it's important for us to be responsible as men. I think Mr. Overton, is a responsible man. I watch what he do. In general, Mr. Thomas, I don't know what your face look like. I've probably seen you before, but I'm sure as well, you're responsible as well. I just believe that we got to be visible. Men have to be visible. In my church, for the men's ministry as well. It's called Men of Purpose. I help out with that. And one of my goals is to create visibility, activity, and presence and participation from a visible standpoint with the men in my church as well. And I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna get out here. I got some things, you're gonna see me. I'm gonna put it on social media, and I'm gonna push this thing because we have to be responsible. And I believe it'll help decrease things like the gun violence that we see that's going on in our city of Portsmouth. So.
And Mike, we want to thank you so much as we come to a close for coming on. And we're going to have you back because it's so much more that you do, especially with your podcast, the Locker Room podcast.
Yeah, that's just another extension about manhood. It's a space where I'm able to, I have women come on too.
That's what I was going to say, even though it's called Locker Room and Minutes on there. You do bring ladies in there and get their perspective, which is, I think it's kind of cool. It's not an all men thing because, we all in here together. So we're going to come back and talk about that and some of the other things that you do. But we really appreciate it and felt like it was important to have the focus for this program on your book and the message you're conveying to.
Thank you.
Probably been in your situation or not in your situation. And like you said earlier before we came on the broadcast, it's something that young ladies can look at and relate to as well, as far as dealing with their fathers, because it's important for them as well to be connected with their fathers.
If you don't mind, I do want to touch on that real quick. There's a chapter in my book where I basically address using my mom as an example. And there's so many situations that I've experienced where the mother and father are having confrontation and they totally forget about the bigger or more important part, which is the child or children that they've birthed between the two people. And if the father isn't toxic, a type of toxic person, or doing the things that my father did, regardless of whatever relationship that mother had with the father, you gotta allow the man to be in the child's life. You have to put your own feelings to the side and allow that man to be present. Money is one thing, but at the end of the day, money didn't matter to me when I was growing up. His physical presence is what I needed. I might have needed this or that for money and all of that, but I think sometimes parents can get so caught up in the financial aspect, which is another F, to the point where they totally forget about how important that the presence of a father weighs so much greater, than finances do. So, and I try to address that to some degree, and I may do another version of this book and dive deeper into that. Which I've, that's come up in conversation for people who've read the book so far. And I think that's really something that from the woman's perspective or anybody who's having a child or raising a child and the father's not around to really think about that.
Yes,
Because I think that gets swept under the rug.
exactly.
And again, thank you. And we will have you back. And we want everybody to stay tuned and to next week as we continue to try to have discussions about what's going on in the city with our young men and women. We're going to have Ronnie Ratcliffe Jr., who is a coach here in the city of Portsmouth, and he has 2 sons.
He's my old teammate.
Yeah, he has 2 sons that's playing at IC Norcom, and at that age that I know any man or father or mother will be worried about the well-being of those 2 young men. So he's going to be on here to talk about his contributions and what he worries about with his sons and things like that, as we continue to talk about what we need to do to make a difference in the lives of our young folks here in the city of Portsmouth. And again, Michael, thank you. Thank you, co-host. And
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Talk is here for our voice.
Our community.
In our future.
And we thank you, everyone. God bless you. Have a great day.
Y'all have a good day.
Thank you.
Get that book, y'all.
I'll be getting the book, Mike, and plus I look forward to helping me with this computer here.
Yes.